What is the strangest mystery that is still unsolved? An unknown group of people broke into an FBI building, and no one has found out who they are. But the best part of the story is they did it by leaving a sticky note that said, "Do not lock the door tonight," and it worked. This is my favorite weird and barely known one. Back in 2013, an unknown group assaulted a power substation in California. By all appearances, it was pretty sophisticated. Scouted firing positions, all casings wiped of prints. They targeted transformers so they'd take time to overheat before triggering any alarms. Also knew exactly when the police would arrive. No suspect or motive to this day. They also cut some fiber optic cables in a vault nearby. Conspiracy types think it was a dry run by Russia or possibly China to see how effective an attack like that might be. Who was Perseus? From 1943 to 1946, the Soviet Union had a high-level spy in the Manhattan Project. Codenamed Perseus, this spy was a scientist at the White Sands Missile Testing Site in New Mexico and the main research facilities in Los Alamos. Perseus saw pretty much the entire project start to finish, giving the Russians everything they needed to get to work on their own bomb. The fact that they were able to do so within 4 years of the end of World War II, when their nation was still devastated, is proof positive that Perseus helped a great deal. And to top it all off, Perseus was never caught or positively identified. What on earth happened to the Trump family? So it's this Australian family who owned a berry farm. Somehow Mr. and Mrs. Trump and their 3 grown kids developed the belief that they weren't safe and they needed to flee their farm without cell phones or anything traceable, credit cards, etc. It sounds like the oldest son wasn't sold on whatever it was that led them to flee. He brought his phone, but it eventually got tossed from the car. He ended up bailing first and taking a train home. From there, the rest of the family slowly separated and suffered various degrees of emotional breaks. The 2 girls stole a car. Somehow they got separated and one made it home, but the other was found on the floor in the back seat of some guy's car in a catatonic state. He spotted her after he started down the road. Eventually, the parents were found wandering around aimlessly. Fortunately, they were all okay physically, but what the F happened? Was someone actually after them? Were they delusional? As far as I know, the family hasn't released any updates. The whereabouts of the last Gestapo chief Heinrich Müller. The last verified sighting of him was in Berlin roughly 3 days before it fell. He had stated he knew full well what the Russians did to prisoners, and he had no intention of being captured. As chief of the Gestapo, he more than likely had access to foreign documents, as well as ways to replicate them. Both the CIA and the KGB spent time looking for him, but no trace has ever been found. Aisha Degree. Girl leaves her house in the middle of the night during a storm and disappeared. The only problem is that she was terrified of thunder and lightning and had no motive for leaving because her home life was fine. Then her clothes and backpack were found a year later in an abandoned construction site. The USS Cyclops, a coal ship, disappeared with 306 men, the largest U.S. Navy loss of life that didn't involve combat. The suicide of Ellen Greenberg, 27 stab wounds in different areas of the body. Edit, 20 stab wounds. 27 was her age at the time of death. Thanks for correcting. Suicide stabbings are so ridiculous. There's a case from Denmark in 2003 where a woman was found dead by her husband, who called the police and said she had killed herself. She was on the bedroom floor next to a broken lamp. Her wristwatch was torn off and her panties pulled down, and she had 179 stab wounds. Because it was a Sunday, they had to call in a criminal assistant on his off day, and he deemed it suicide because she had a history of depression. Which of the 3 astronauts aboard Apollo 10 was responsible for the floating turd? The Sodder children. Their house burned down in the middle of the night. Several of the kids were presumed dead, but their bodies were never found in the debris, and it never burned hot enough to cremate them. It started to look extremely suspicious, and the parents, until their deaths, believed that they had been taken for some reason. Many years down the line, they did receive a photo and cryptic note from someone claiming to be their son, but it was never authenticated. Boy in the box. A deceased little boy found beaten, recently shaved of his hair, and abandoned in a box for a bassinet that he was way too old for. The photos and reconstruction of him released to the public in the desperate hope of identifying him are haunting. The St. Louis Jane Doe. A little girl found in an abandoned house, decapitated, and bound at the hands. They have no dental records or facial reconstruction to go from. The case has led nowhere. She's just nameless, lost to time. Tri-State Crematory. A devastating case of a man called back from his college football career to take over his father's business when the father fell ill. Over time, people started noticing bodies and body parts on the grounds just hanging around. When someone finally took the report seriously, they found that he'd been piling bodies up randomly all over the property, often when it would have been much easier to cremate them instead of hauling them around to where they were dumped. The guy gave families canisters of cement dust instead of ashes. The mystery on this one is, why? The guy never gave up the answer to what happened there and will only insist that there are no answers. His lawyer theorized he had mercury poisoning from cremating amalgam fillings, but that doesn't really explain why you would dump a body instead of cremating it when the latter takes less effort. The West Memphis 3 case. All of the satanic panic mess obscured so much that will probably go unanswered now. A bloody man covered in mud stumbled into a Bojangles the night those little boys went missing. Cops barely investigated that incident and lost the blood evidence they did collect regarding it. What was going on with John Mark Byers and Terry Hobbs, 2 dads of 2 of those kids, both turning up with evidence and acting at different points like they may have been involved? Lars Mitternick, a German tourist on vacation in Bulgaria. He got into a fight, and the medical complications kept him from going home on a flight with his friends. Staying behind, it looks like his mental state unraveled completely over the course of a few days, increasing paranoia, eventually culminating in his complete disappearance into a field of sunflowers. What happened to Brian Schaeffer? This happened in my hometown. This med student went to a bar with friends and then fully disappeared off the face of the earth. Edit. The podcast True Crime Garage has an incredible series on this case. The hosts are both from Columbus and around Brian's age. They talk through the whole case in depth, and they also have a few guests that they talk with as well. The Overton Bridge. It's a bridge in Scotland where dogs always unexplainably jump off. It's very strange, and nobody knows why they do this. Dogs who survived reportedly walked back up and jumped off again. They even had to put up a warning sign to keep your dog on a leash and to watch them. A dog psychologist says maybe it's because of certain scents or animals down below. But most people have disagreed with this theory. It's really weird. As someone from Chicago who loves unsolved mysteries, I would say the Max Headroom broadcast signal intrusion, and I don't think we will ever find out who was behind it. It's been over 30 years, and we still have no idea who was behind that incredibly bizarre hijack. There was a thread a while ago of someone that thought they had figured it out. That seemed very possible, but it was updated and they were ruled out as suspects. The Boötes Void is a region of outer space that contains no galaxies or stars, and we don't know why. The guy's motive for shooting up all those people in Vegas? At the start of lots of chapters of the Quran, there are mysterious groups of letters. No one knows what they mean, although there are lots of theories. A strange but not creepy mystery, the disappearance and reappearance of Lawrence Joseph Bader. He was a cookware salesman from Akron, Ohio, who went missing in 1957. He went fishing, a storm hit, and his boat was found the next day with some damage. He was in debt and in trouble with the IRS, and his wife was about to have their third child. Ken McElroy's murder. This douche canoe terrorized an entire town until the town decided they had had enough, and then somebody shot him in broad daylight in front of a bunch of witnesses. The Miyazawa family. Just listened to the Case File podcast on this, and it has my mind blown. Someone entered the family home around 11:30 p.m., killed everyone, ate some ice cream, took a nap, pooped and didn't flush, changed clothes, and left like 8 hours after the crime. 20 years on, and we don't know who or why. The 1987 Arkansas murders of Don Henry and Kevin Ives. Flight 19 of December 5th, 1945. 5 bomber craft on a routine training run became lost while heading back and eventually disappeared entirely. Audio has them saying that they thought they had ended up over the Florida Keys, but wind could not have allowed that. Even more interesting is the fact the rescue craft dispatched to locate them also disappeared. Another one is Colonel Phillips' Shue's death. On April 16, 2003, 54-year-old Colonel Phillips Shue left his Texas home and headed to work. 2 hours later, he was found dead in his car, an apparent victim of a car crash. The car was caved in on the driver's side, and Phillips suffered major head trauma as a result. He was killed instantly. I will forever post about my great-aunt when these come up. Where is Kimberly Langwell? She disappeared in 1999 in Beaumont, Texas. Her car was found in the parking lot of an Eckert's drugstore, but her purse and keys were missing. Her cell phone was inside. We all know she wouldn't have left her daughter, Tiffany, just like that. She loved her and loved life and those who surrounded her. Everyone who knew Kimberly loved her. She was the shining star on a dark night. If you have ever seen her alive, please call the police. I have posted her case below. Albert Johnson, the Mad Trapper of Rat River. A pretty cool, mostly forgotten story about a man chased by the RCMP through the North. Who killed JonBenet Ramsey? In 1994, close to 100 school children, 60 on record, described seeing a disc-shaped craft land behind their school during morning break time in Rua, Zimbabwe. Many of them interacted with beings that fit the gray alien description, with the children receiving what is described as some sort of telepathic communication. They all still stick to their stories today. In 1977, we received a radio signal from outer space that lasted about 72 seconds. To this day, we still do not know where it originated from. The suicide of Lavina Johnson, a black female U.S. Army private who was found shot to death inside a burning tent, with a broken nose, black eyes, broken teeth, raped, and acid burns on her genitals in July 2005. U.S. Army ruled her death a suicide. Will the Delphi murders ever be solved? Who was the man on the bridge behind them?